Hey, how's it going? So this phone is just giving me so much trouble. I'm very glad to have it. It's better than nothing, but man, I can't get it to film what I want it to when I want it to. So here's a terrible shot of my little disclaimer board and a description of what I'm doing here. I'm so sorry about that. I hope this shows up in a way that makes sense. So I'm just gonna hold this because I can't get it to act right on the stupid freaking stand. I'm a little irritated. So here's what got me on here talking about this. I was on Twitter yesterday on the computer machine, and people were talking about clowns, sort of specifically the fear of them. And it has been pointed out that Americans seem to have developed a pretty strong fear of clowns, but in places like Europe and Ukraine, especially, or where the Ukrainian refugees are landing in, I believe Poland it was, they showed news coverage showed lots of scenes of children being greeted by clowns and entertained by them, and they were happy and they were laughing. And honestly, when I was a little kid and my mom would take me to the circus, like Ringling Brothers, the clowns didn't particularly scare me at that point. But then as I got to be an adult, they took on another like tone or something. But anyway, it reminded me of something that I. It was like buried treasure, or I don't know treasure, but it was buried for so long I had completely forgotten that this happened. When I was little, they gave me a Jack in the Box, and my parents and grandparents and aunt and uncles were like all thrilled for me to have this thing. I was scared of that thing. This would have been when I was like, I don't know, 3 to 5 or somewhere in there. But that thing for 2 years, I got no sleep because at night it would all of a sudden start playing a little tune, a little bit of the tune, and then just pop open. I mean, I'd be in bed asleep, and this thing is across the room, and I would like put it out of sight if I could, but that didn't occur to me right at first. So for a while, I'd be in there trying to sleep, and this thing was just like, "Hi, how you doing?" Dunk, 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 with its weird little crank tune, and then the little clown thing would pop out. So I don't know at that age that I thought, "Ooh, clowns are scary." I just thought that Jack in the Box thing was scary, and the adults always wanted me to play with it. I didn't like to play with it, even after I knew what it did. Like I knew if I turned that crank, that little clown was gonna pop out of that thing. But I didn't want anything to do with it. I was afraid of it, and that was actually even before it started going off by itself at night. So it went on for about 2 years, and I am not sure. I think I just shut it down. Like whatever was scaring me. I know my hair looks like hell. I just took it out of the ponytail and I tried to press it down, but I don't want to wet it. And so this is the reality of my hair. If I have it up in the ponytail for however long after it's wet, it retains that shape until I do something forceful to it, like wet it again, or I don't use like straightening things, irons, or anything like that. But it is what it is, right? So I, commented back to the people that had put up a post about the clowns, and today, or well, yeah, today, because I didn't stay up and watch it last night. I watched Colbert when I got up, and I have to be honest. I pretty much only watched the interview and like meanwhile or so, things like that, and then I don't watch the guests very often. I watch some of them, but not very often. Anyway, I turn it on. First thing I decided to watch this morning before my cowboy stuff, and uh, in the monologue, Stephen Colbert is talking about haunted Jack in the Boxes, and I was like, wasn't I just saying that yesterday? And that's not the first time it's happened. Like, I'll write something on my WordPress, and then the next day, certain places that I frequent will be using words and phrases that I used in my WordPress, but I won't have any views. So it's like, it's irritating because you feel like that was my idea. You stole my idea. But here's the thing, no ideas are really our own. I mean, we are certainly vessels to receive inspiration, which I just learned something recently about inspiration and expiration. And it's not expiration, not in the negative sense of like your time is up or your food has expired and is no longer safe to eat. It's like when you breathe, it's a spiritual thing. So I'm going, I don't want people to confuse me talking about God with me talking about like organized religion, which I call industrial religion, because so many of them have popped out and become money making organizations. Well, I mean, it's not new, it's been happening since ever. There's always been this drive to like get money off people. So there you have it. But I'm talking more on a spiritual level. So just understand, I'm not talking religion or Bible here, but there is a greater overarching enemy, energy, not our enemy, all totally behind us 100%, because that energy, each of us is a shard, fractal, if you will, of that overarching wholeness of energy, of creation. So you might see a lot of talk about deep breathing, and I wrote something recently on my WordPress about counting to 10. And it's something I used to hear a lot as a child with a temper. Take a deep breath and count to 10. And they never specified if you're supposed to let the breath out, which is, it just occurred to me as kind of funny, but I guess I inferred the fact that I was supposed to be breathing out too. But they used to tell me, take a deep breath and count to 10. And in my piece, I said it was kind of wrong, because what I think needed to happen was take 10 deep breaths and then get more mellow again, because that's what I find myself having to do today. But I, like, as I started to say, you'll see a lot of talk about deep breathing and breath and being conscious of your breath, like especially when you're meditating. So I learned recently from a channel I was watching that when you are inspired, you're like in inspirating, and then when you exhale, you're expirating. But on the breath comes knowledge, inspiration, creativity, uh, all kinds of things like that that you can't like hold in your hand and really take a picture of and present as like this is what it is. It's whole and true and unmistakable as what I'm saying it is. It's like faith. You just gotta believe. And people will say, and I've talked about this before. People will say, seeing is believing. Well, how do you see a belief? Tell me how that's visible. That's also backwards to me. To me, believing is seeing. When you put down the construct of I'm not going to believe it till I see it, and then allow to see it when you believe in it, it's a whole change in tone. So back to the inspiration. I pretty much talked about how it affects me, and then I get irritated, and I know this too, but it's hard to think of yourself as both part of this giant amorphous thing and a single solo entity, I guess. And then you have the way of thinking that I really have had to change over the years since I had my spiritual awakening, my Kundalini awakening. But it wasn't just that. It was like those happen like I was going to say frequently, but I don't know if that's right. They happen a number of times over our lifetime. And I don't know that they end. at any particular time. I think that there are just peaks and plateaus with it. But oh, so okay, I know that it's just hard to separate the person that, like the quote unquote 3D person that you are, to be able to expand your mind, and it even is less about your mind but your heart and your gut feelings. That's what it's more about than you, like your thought process or what your ego is going to tell you to do or how to act or that kind of thing. So it's hard to, I'm constantly trying to make the adjustment from the 3D to the higher dimension of being, because 3D is with the fighting and the killing and the hating and the erasing people, and like there was a gentleman on Twitter and he would put great pictures up, and like that's what I like a lot there, is to put up, to look at pretty pictures of like flowers and architecture and all kinds of stuff and archaeology and whatever it is. But this guy was great. He'd put up these pictures and they had like great contrast, and they'd be anywhere from space photos to earth stuff and everywhere in between. And sometimes he'd post a written piece. So he put one of those up today, and I eagerly went to it to read it. And he talked about art and life and things like that. And then he got to a point where he started talking about the West and how he views the way that we think about religion. And he seemed to feel like we had disillusionment in Christianity. And that's probably true for some of us. It's certainly true for me, but in a 3D way, because on the other level, I realize it as something else, a little bit more than what we get from the 3D. And so I was like, what is he talking about? I don't think I like the course, the way the turn the course is taken. And then the next thing he started talking about was how we're trying to get the world, like specifically America, is trying to get the world to accept perversions or perverted people like gay and trans people. And I'm like, okay, now first you're going to tell us we're doing religion wrong, those of us that are doing that. And then you're going to tell us that we're accepting a perversion. And all I would say is if you're like a God person, my answer to those kinds of comments about how trans or gay people are wrong, or bisexual people, or even people that are accepting of those apparently are not acceptable. God doesn't make mistakes. Let me just throw that crap right back in your face. God doesn't make mistakes, but it doesn't, right? Mother, father, it, whatever, doesn't make mistakes. And the more you uh, leave that sort of 3D thought process, the more easily it is you're able to accept these beings that are just also beings like yourself, but different, more open to things that you are like the there was a concept a friend and I came up with, and it was about a person that was very uptight, and I made the remark that they're so clenched they couldn't get a toothpick in their chocolate starfish, basically. And that's kind of, I think, a big block for people, getting so clenched up and judgmental about people and blaming the way it makes you feel on them. Like, no one is making anyone feel anything. We all are doing that kind of thing to ourselves. And I think once we have a better understanding of that, a lot of the angst and sort of difference placing making kind of becomes irrelevant, because you realize that we really are all one, right? And I don't mean just people, I mean animals, I mean rocks, I mean water, I mean the air, I mean everything. We're all part of the same unit, the same larger being. So I was like, okay, that's unfortunate. But if he feels that way, I no longer want to promote his work on my site. So I, unfollowed and blocked him because, and I know that might seem harsh, but it's less about, it's not about hurting him at all. It's about keeping him and his opinions away from me because I feel pained by them. So I'm not blaming him, but he did bring it, so I'm taking it and him away, or I have taken him and it away. So that thinking about like the Jack in the Box thing, as an example, of course, set me on a trail of other thoughts, and it reminded me, like the first time it happened, I wanted to call it something where I thought that I thought of something, but really inspiration comes from above or from outside, and then we are able to inhale it, get the inspiration in us from this bigger outer source, and then with our creative vessels, our take on the creativity, what we take the inspiration and then do with it, that is our work. But we don't, I mean, in a sense, we do have ownership of some things. But if you drop away all of the trappings, which are pretty 3D, uh, and just are at the heart of it, you understand that you did this thing. You're inspired out of nowhere. Well, not nowhere. I think I explained that already. But you have a possessiveness for it, an ownership, a kinship to it. And you do, but you don't own it. It's not like yours. People are not going to like this, but nothing anyone creates is exclusively theirs. And when you're one with everything else, you are sharing stuff. Like, you may not believe what I say, you may not like what I'm saying, but I'm just going to say it's my opinion until you know better. But it's not my job to get you there. What I'm doing here is just talking about how I feel about some things and my thoughts on them. So, like I said, I wanted to call it something when I felt like I did something and then I see someone else doing virtually the same thing. And we know this happens. Like, think about um, like Edison and the phone or electricity. He was not the only one in the world coming up with the concept, and that's so typical of us Americans to think like we're the greatest country in the world because we invented such and such first. But like the plane, well, when Orville and Wilbur Wright were here flying fairly low to the ground, but off the ground in flight, absolutely, there was at least another person in France doing the same thing. I think I read that there were two in France doing it at the same time, which means there were people everywhere else also doing the same thing or have that had done it at the time, in the past, in the future. Yeah, in the future. It doesn't matter because it's all the way we view time as humans is something we created, and it doesn't, it's a construct. It's not real. Same thing like money, same way. Same kind of, we built a structure around it to make it a solid sort of thing, and it we do that for our little minds to be able to have something to grasp onto. So I started out in my mind going, I'm going to call it the Marconi effect because, and this was one of Nikola Tesla's competitors, right? Marconi with radio, and they had, uh, I guess, quite a struggle between them. I was going to say I would assume there were lawsuits. I don't know that there were lawsuits today. There would definitely be lawsuits, but it could be. Uh, and actually, I have it here. Marconi, an Italian, emerged victorious after filing his crucial patents in 1904, some years after his Serbian rival, Nikola Tesla. So, apparently, Tesla filed patents before Marconi, but Marconi ended up winning out. And unfortunately for Tesla, kind of the same thing happened when he was working with Edison, who was, in retrospect, I guess, notorious for stealing the ideas and creations of his workers and not crediting them or paying them the dividends from profits. Swell guy. And that was why I wanted to talk about Nikola Tesla and his competitors. The man, Nikola Tesla, had so many ideas and he spoke very clearly about where they came from. He would hear things, tones and sounds, and get information in a state, in a meditative state. Like the guy kind of lived in a like hallucinogenic meditative state, and he got lots of information. I mean, look him up yourself if you haven't already. So many inventions. A lot of the stuff that we have today, that's like what I have in my hand, he, I think, predicted would be things that we would use like a spoon or a comb, and we do. We're silly with the phones, but he said I get my inspiration from. I think he would have said God, and I just wanted to illustrate my point. So I started to call the thing of like, hey, I thought that was mine. I just did that. What are you doing with it? Well, it's not really ours, and for sure, my inspiration comes from outside. Like when I do these videos, I don't get on here every day and just start talking like a lot of people do. I like to wait until I feel moved to do it. Like I have something to say. And so that's all it took, was somebody in the Twitter, like looking, as I know dang well, a lot of like Seth Meyers, who I enjoy quite a bit. He delivers his writer's comedy pretty well, and he wrote for Saturday Night Live for a long time, and I don't think anyone would dispute the guy's funny, you know. Well, I guess some, I can think of some that would dispute it because of what he may have said about them or their belief system, but you can't please everybody. But he has talked about scouring Twitter, and what is he looking for? Stuff to talk about, stuff to make jokes about. And I know he's not the only one that does it. Like I really enjoy Saturday Night Live. I have watched it since it very first came out. In fact, I was a very little kid in 1975. I was about, I think, 8 or 9. I think 8. And I was staying over at my aunt's house, and my cousin, the older son, woke me up, and he said, "Hey, come in the den. We got to be quiet. We're gonna watch the show." And I was like, "What? Okay." And I just went with him, and it was the first episode of Saturday Night Live, and I've been watching it ever since. And so here's a little inspiration point. God, this phone sucks. Um, so I was gonna call the effect of someone else finding my same idea or having my same idea, I understand now, the Marconi effect. And that's, I guess, right. But now that I've said all of that and then thought about it before I said all of it, I'm like wondering if maybe the Tesla effect is more accurate, because he had so many ideas that he was just relieved of. And when he died, my God, our government could not wait to swoop in and steal like all of his stuff and tell nobody about what it was about, and just hoard it. And they're doing, or have been doing, God knows what with it. So he was the aggrieved party, is my point. So yeah, I was having the Tesla effect bad today. And I've had it recently before too. And this is my explanation. I haven't, there was a site, there's a site, well, it's cracked. And I was watching one of their videos, and it was that thing, like I had just released like a piece on WordPress the evening before, And Jordan Breeding was like mouthing hella stuff that I had said, like phrases and words, and I was like, "What WTF, man?" So in the comments, I was like, kind of salty, but I was like, "Nah, I wouldn't. A gratuity wouldn't hurt, or something like that." And they were like, "Eh, this is what, this is what I was talking about." So I'm gonna post this, and we'll see. Like, maybe I'll check back with you. Maybe I won't. But we'll see what I've said here. I'll then later, after posting it, find something very similar. Actually, I probably will check back with it because I think that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I believe I have shot my shot here. I would like to thank Weezer for the lovely stylings of the music. And let me see if I can do this without screwing up the recording. Thank you and good night. Oh.